Welcome to the Know Your Ship podcast, presented by eHub. I'm your host, Frank Dolce. The one and only Dan Clark. And if you want history on Dan, it's all over the place, but listen to podcast number 1 because we go through Dan's history and growing up and all of these amazing and interesting things. And so you'll learn a lot if you listen to number 1. In this podcast, there's 2 things I want to talk to you about. First of all, how's everything? How's your family? How's
Everybody's
life?
good. Yeah, everybody's good.
Yeah,
Life's good. We live back and forth from here in Arizona, so it's fun. Season ticket holders, cut and dried ute, so we always come in for the football games. And
yeah.
I know this is an evergreen podcast, so we won't mention who we beat this week, but the Utes are on a roll.
That's right. You know, one of the things that you do so well, and I think people are so fascinated by you, is because you have this way of teaching a lesson through telling a story. Like that seems to be your thing, the storytelling aspect. And I know you've talked about that, but where did you develop that? Why is it meaningful? And how can people learn to do that? I mean, you seem like that's a natural thing. You just have the ability to tell a story. Maybe it's just something that you've developed over time. But I think it's really useful in all facets of personal and business life.
Okay, so let's just kind of cut that apart. Let's dissect that. So when I started getting better after I recovered from my football injury, as I was recovering, people were curious of what was going on. You know, mind over matter, is it really that powerful? What's my story? And so I was asked to speak, and I parlayed it into a full-time deal. When I started getting asked to speak, I went to my dad, my hero, and I said, "Dad, what kind of a speaker should I be?" And he said, "The kind of speaker that you like to listen to." And that's why I became a storyteller. So then fast forward, when Zig Ziglar, a world-renowned motivational teacher, heard me speak and took me under his wing, he personally mentored me for 25 to 30 years on the art and science of storytelling. So he was known as the storyteller. Mm-hmm. And now fast forward a little bit further, when someone tells us something, how many of us have had the experience where someone tells us something and they walk away and we forget what they told us? Or they teach us something, or you're in a convention as somebody, death by PowerPoint, and they try to cram so much information on the same slide, nobody can read it past the 5th row.
Yikes.
And you're just trying to capture and quantify and measure all this information that's being force-fed. And then someone pauses and tells a story. You remember the story, which is linked to the lesson, and that's how you basically learn. That's how you remember. How many of us have read a book and we've understood every word, and then when we close the book, click off the reading light, we forget what we read. Mm-hmm. So I became a student of where recall and understanding come to an apex in the triangle. And it's every 50 minutes. So you move your state, you change your environment, you walk around, then you come back. That's why we have classes every 50 minutes or 45 minutes in high school and college. That's where they came up with that idea, I'm sure. And so when I started studying where recall and understanding come to that apex at 50 minutes, how could we strengthen that and elongate that process? And the discovery was you just tell stories. Facts tell, stories sell. People remember stories. For example, if I said, "Frank, you and your staff are so famous for unconditional support. You're always there for your clients no matter what. They can rely on you. The transference of trust is a real deal in your culture. That support is just so awesome." And I think every single person with whom you come in contact should understand that Frank Dolce is known as unconditional support. Well, I didn't tell a story. Mm-hmm. So everybody's going to say, yeah, Dolce and his organization, they're known for their support. But what if I said, we all need to give each other unconditional support? And to help you remember, a mother encourages her daughter to come home as soon as school is over. The time comes, the time goes. 30 minutes later, her daughter walks in through the front door of her home and her mother scolds her. "Where have you been? I've been worried sick." She says, "Oh, Mommy, I walked my friend Sally home. She dropped her doll on the sidewalk. I broke all the pieces. It was awful. Her mother said, "So you're late because you stayed to help your friend pick up the pieces of the doll and put it back together again?" She said, "Oh no, Mommy, I didn't know how to fix the doll. I just stayed to help her cry." So they might not remember my name. They might not remember that I was trying to teach them about unconditional support, but most likely they'll remember, I guaranteed they will remember the story, and then most likely keep it attached to the principle of the truth I was trying to teach, that we need to be there for each other in unconditional support.
Yeah. Okay. There are so many stories. You tell so many stories, and it feels like you have instant recall on all of these things. How did you develop that?
First, you take the time. When you have an experience, you have to take the time to figure out what life lessons you just learned. You have to. Most people don't. "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to me." And I'm like, okay, you're crying for a reason. You're devastated for a reason. Pain is a signal to grow, not to suffer. Once we learn the lesson, the pain is teaching us. The pain goes away. So in life, there's no mistakes, only lessons. Take the time to learn the lesson so that you don't repeat the same mistake twice. Most people don't take the time to learn the lesson because of what I do for a living. I suppose that's the muscle memory. That's the system I've created. So when I hear a joke, I remember the joke because I remember the reality that someday that was so funny, I want to tell it to somebody else. So I'm more in tune. I'm more focused in on listening and remembering. And then I'll immediately tell the joke to somebody so I can recall it again, and it's kind of logged into my mental library, if you will. But when we can take the time to learn the lessons or figure out what the lessons are, then we can start embellishing, expanding that story, and get serious about how would I share it with someone with these life lessons included. So can I give you an example?
Absolutely.
So I've flown all the fighter jets in the United States Air Force, all the jets that have two seats, because even though I fly, by law, I can't take off and land a military aircraft. So when I go up in a 90-minute sortie, I always get the stick, and I can fly the jet or the bomber for 30 out of the 90 minutes sortie and have a time of my life. So I might as well inject this. As a civilian, I've flown all the fighter jets, all the bombers, been up into space. We talked about that last podcast. And everybody says, "How were you able to pull that off?" Well, I'm a storyteller. I want adventures to share. I want to make myself more compelling to be around, more fascinating to talk to, more qualified to teach, to learn from. Sales statistics, the analytics on the sales profession, 44% of sales professionals quit by the fourth sales call. By the first sales call. 24% quit after the second sales call. 14% quit by the third sales call, and 12% quit by the fourth sales call. That's 94% of sales professionals who quit by the fourth sales call, and yet 85% of our sales are closed between the fifth and the 12th sales call. So again, let me regurgitate. The goal is not to do business with everybody who wants what you have. The goal is to do business only with those who believe what you believe, so they choose you, not just somebody who does what you do. Why would they choose you? Because you're more fascinating to talk to, more compelling to be around, more qualified to learn from. So it behooves all of us who are in the people building business. Every person in the world is in the sales world. If you're a father, you're trying to sell the idea to your little 3-year-old girl to eat her spinach. Zig Ziglar said every kid will eat spinach if you wait long enough. But again, we have to be in the sales process. We're always out. You're dating, trying to pick up somebody at a sports bar, when you're trying to connect and develop relationships. We're all in the sales world. So who are we fooling not to become the best sales professionals we possibly could be? Well, the way we sell is to turn every sales pitch into a serve pitch. And the serve pitch is, what can I do for you? And in order for you to respond and think that I really can help you, that I really can take you from where you are to where you want to be, I have to have enough life experience that I can convince you I can turn decades into days, because I've been there, I've traveled the road, I've got some insights and wisdom that you don't have at the current moment. And because of my experience, you trust me that I can take you to the promised land. And that experience is my story. my experiences are my stories. And so I wanted to give that preamble to answer your question that life is a story. You know, we're painters, it's a canvas, and every day we wake up and we can use a broad brush, or we can get that finely tweaked, you know, small, whatever the brush is called in the art world, and we can paint our canvas every single day. That's why 73% of my business is always returned, because they know I have more stories to share. And I record every single story, joke, anecdote, quote that I share in a speech on my CRM and my contact management system. At the end of every speech, I write down everything, because I'm spontaneous. I have jokes that pop in. I have a story. I'm like, yeah, let me share this one. And then when they call me back, I look at my notes and I'm like, okay, I told that, but I'm going to tell them this one, and this one. So life, because it's a story, and because we're all in the sales world, it behooves us to turn our bucket list into a living list. What am I going to do today? So having said all of that, the way that I've flown all the jets and the bombers got up into space is through service before self. So every commander in the military, I've been downrange 8 times, Iraq, Afghanistan, you know, the demilitarized zone in Korea, you know, all over the world. And every commander knows that I've donated my time and whatever talent I have. So I've given over 350 free speeches to the military. And eventually one of the commanders will say, Clark, we know what your speaker's fee is, and you keep donating your time. What can we do for you? I'm like, I want to fly an F-18. They can't say no. I want to fly an F-16. I want to fly with the Thunderbirds. I want to go up into space. So it's all a bartering system. That's not my motivation. But when you create a moral obligation, the law of reciprocity is a real deal. Karma is a real deal. What goes around comes around. And when you serve and serve and serve, it creates a moral obligation for that person to eventually say, how may I serve you? So there's nothing wrong with already having an ask in place. You do your due diligence, and I know every aircraft and every asset on every base in the world. And when a commander asks me to speak to all of his troops and says, what can we do for you? I already know what's in his garage, baby. I already know what's in his hangar. And I'm like, yeah, I want to fly an F-15, no problem. I want to fly an F-16. So here's the great story. So the very first fighter jet I ever flew was in Patuxent River, Maryland. I spoke for the U.S. Naval Admirals Leadership Conference in Pensacola, Florida at the Naval Museum. I walk in, the Blue Angels are hanging from the ceiling. It was so inspiring. And their wingspans are 18 inches apart. And I start thinking, man, I'd love to interview the lead, to talk about trust and training and all these cool things that he or she would have, you know, the expert eyewitness account on. And I introduced and I dazzled these folks. It went well. Actually, it was one of my better speeches. They were doing the wave and name of their future children after me. It was great. They were chanting Dolce, Dolce,
Yes,
like we used to do in the stands when you
absolutely.
throw for 600 yards in the first half.
72 people, 69 were all my family.
It was so bad. And I go back to the back of the room, and four-star Admiral Clark and 3-star Admiral Dwyer, they said, Clark, that was amazing. What can we do for you? I said, I want to fly an F-18. They said, we could do that. And I'm like, really? It was my first chance asking. And they said, really? 2 weeks later, I flew into Baltimore, Maryland, rented a car, drove south to Patuxent River, Maryland. I show up, and the sign above the gate says Naval Test Pilot School, and I should have just turned around and gone back to my hotel. Because I I drive on the base, I get on my car, start walking around, and these fighter pilots have antifreeze flowing through their veins. They're just unique cats, man. They walk like they sat on something hot. They're just looking for the enemy. They're just BAs, man. So I'm a diehard romantic. I'm looking for, Tom Cruise. I'm looking for Maverick and
Goose around somewhere.
Goose and Iceman, Cougar, and Kelly McGillis in the bathroom. And I never found any of them.
You didn't? They weren't there?
I get introduced to the flight surgeon who checked things I didn't even think I owned. And I'm fitted in my flight suit, my full combat steel-toed boots, gloves, torso harness, safety vest, helmet, the whole deal. And they take me to the aquatics center for aquatics training. In case we crash into the water, I need to know how to survive. So they had me dive into the pool, Olympic-sized swimming pool, and swim 2 laps. That's 100 yards in full combat gear, 85 pounds of combat gear. I almost drowned like 7 times. Then they put me in an underwater maze and blindfolded me as if we got crashed into the ground and something happened to me, and I had to find my way out of this underwater maze and come to the surface. I almost drowned. I had to tread water for 15 minutes in full combat gear. I'm getting tired. They take me to the center and they strap me on this 45-degree sled to practice ejection training. And this guy, his call sign was Psycho. I think he had one glass eye. He was kind of one of those guys. Hey, you ever eject out of a jet? I'm like, duh. He straps me in. He says, on 3, pull the yellow lever between your legs. 3, I pull it, shoots me up this sled, catch 3.5 Gs. Did that 3 times. They taught me how to work the parachute in case we had to eject. And I'm hanging from this huge bar, and I'm getting castrated with the nylon straps and trying to figure out how am I going to drive this. And I get off and my voice is 7 pitches higher for about 36 minutes. What an experience. Anyway, that night I go to dinner with Dog Thompson, the commander. And we're talking. I said, so, sir, is there something I should eat to prepare me for the flight in the morning? He said, yeah, bananas. I said, why am I going to cramp up? Do I need the potassium? He goes, no, it's because bananas taste exactly the same coming up as they do going down. I said, okay. So I sleep. The next morning they introduced me to my pilot, Captain Reuter, call sign Roto. And I'm like, what happened to the romance of Maverick and Cougar? I'm like, I'm going to put my life in the hands of Roto Reuter.
Right. Why not?
So we take off. He had more carrier landings and takeoff than anyone else at the base. He was just a superstar Gulf War hero. And so we take off, and we did everything you saw in Maverick Top Gun, the movie. And that's the same aircraft, that F-18.
Yeah.
Went to altitude, 46,000 feet, went twice the speed of sound, 1,200 miles an hour. Did the bombing runs, did the loop-loop, did the whole deal. It was so awesome. 90 minutes later, he let me take the stick for a while. And 90 minutes later, we land. And as we taxied in, there was a journalist there with a camera crew because I'm a civilian, and it was kind of an anomaly that this guy gets to go up and do all this exciting stuff. Pop the canopy, and I'm sitting there, and the journalist asked me one question. She says, so, Mr. Clark, did you pop your cookies? I said, that's it? She goes, yeah. Everybody wants to know, did you pop your cookies? And I said, well, Colonel Thompson was absolutely correct about those bananas last night. And I said, in fact, I ejected a box of Milk Duds I'd eaten at a movie when I was 9. And everybody around, the maintainers, they heard me say that, they were laughing so hard. I said, I was upside down so long, I think I'm the only human being who's ever thrown down. She's taking notes. This is going to be great for the article. Right. So I get out of the jet, and I'm walking back to the locker room with my commander, and I said, how did we fly this magnificent flying machine, state of the art? And he said, by feel. I said, what do you mean? He said, you became the plane. I said, what do you mean? He said, when you climbed up the ladder and slid into the cockpit, did you strap into the F-18 or did you strap the F-18 onto you? So what I just shared was a story that someone could have said, yeah, I got a chance to fly an F-18. We did all this crazy stuff. I popped my cookies, but I wanted to do it again and again because of the thrill. It was so amazing. And what a day.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't teach anybody anything. So Richard Branson, he goes up into space. Jeff Bezos, he goes up into space. William Shatner, Captain Kirk, he goes up into space. And I was so disappointed because all they said when they came back to Earth was it changed my life forever. And that's just wrong. When you're tapped out and given an experience, nothing happens to us in life, everything happens for us. And if we've been given an experience, overcoming cancer, doing whatever, having suicidal ideology, and we snapped out of it, now we know how to talk to someone so that they don't take their lives. If we figured out marriage, all the ups and downs and ebbs and flows of marriage, and I've been married for 44 years, and I have figured out some secrets and rebound rate and how to recover and how to stay with your sweetheart no matter what. You never have a divorce, a murder maybe, but you're never going to have a divorce. We have a moral obligation, Franco, to share our story and our experience with someone whom we can help.
Mm-hmm.
I have so many letters, handwritten letters, back before the email days, back before cell phones. My sweet mom, I employed a lot of folks in my family back in the day. I had so many offices. And my mom saved so many letters from people who said, thank you, you saved my son's life. Thank you, you helped save our marriage. Thank you, you helped kickstart my entrepreneurial idea. And those are heartwarming. You notice I didn't save them. I'm not into that.
Yeah.
But my mother saved them because she
Yeah.
thought they were so significant. And we have that opportunity to impact someone's life. So, so Sir Richard Branson and Bezos, they went up into space, but their entire adventure was 11 minutes from launch to landing, and they only saw the curvature of the Earth for 1 minute. They were shot up like a rock. I was there for 5 hours, sat in the sounds of silence, looking at the breathtaking curvature of the Earth, gazing into the endless blackness of the universe, pondering eternity and my place in it. What's it all about? What's it really all about? Flat earthers bite the wall. I've got videos. It's so extraordinary. And so as a speaker, as an author, but as a human being, I felt the moral obligation to figure out deeper life lessons that I can share with someone, because most people aren't going to get that opportunity to see the curvature of the Earth like I did. And that's why storytelling is so critically important for our communication skills, because we will change someone's life with the story. Let me just illustrate. So I teach public speaking, coach a lot of speakers. A lot of folks, if anybody's interested, you can sign up for my Speak Like a Pro course. And I created what I call the speaker's triangle. And visually, it's a funnel on purpose, because every person, 1-on-1, 1-on-10, 1-on-5 here in your beautiful studio, 1-on-20,000 in an arena, everybody craves the answers to 3 questions, no matter what. It's the essence of sales, the essence of leadership, the essence of coaching, the essence of parenting. Think about it, bro. You've played at the highest level. You've coached at the highest level. You're one of the more extraordinary radio commentators I've ever heard in my life, because what you do is you answer these 3 questions and you didn't even know you were answering them. Question number 1, why should I listen to you? It's the credibility piece. Have you done it historically? Are you currently doing it? Question number 2 is the most significant. That's the credibility piece. Question number 2, the possibility piece. Can I do it too? Can I do what you've said? What you teach, what you've experienced? Can I do it too, with my past, with my limitations, with my weaknesses, and with my strengths? Because when I teach speakers, if you're nervous before you speak, it means you think it's about you. But if you're excited before you speak, you know it's about them. Seek to bless, not impress. And if I stand up and I dazzle the audience and they leave being impressed with me, I completely blew it. But if I fire them up and they leave impressed with themselves, with what they can do, that you don't have to think outside the lines, think outside the box. What if the answers are still in the box? Everything required for us to take ourselves and our organizations to the next level is already inside of us. Mm-hmm. All we have to do is ask the right questions, trigger the right emotions, trigger the right brain chemicals, which we'll get into in story selling, so that they leave going, my gosh, I already know what I have to do. I just have to do it. I just have to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
So it's all about the story. And I love sharing my stories because I always tie a life lesson into that story.
Yeah.
So the story is worth sharing. It's not just rambling. Even my jokes. When I train speakers, you got to make them funny. And you got to tell a joke, but you don't ever tell a joke because if no one laughs, you bomb. But if you tell a joke that has a message and no one laughs, you never bomb, because you're sharing a different way. You're using a different, tool in your toolbox to illuminate and embellish your message.
Yeah.
So,
I have, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 follow-up questions from all of the stuff you just said. I don't know if I'm going to get to all of them. I may forget some
you
of
should
these.
have just called time out, man.
But
Sorry.
No. It's great. It's exactly what I wanted to hear. But the first question I think is, a lot of people will probably say, well, my experience isn't good enough. My experience, nobody cares about it. It doesn't make for a good story. What is your experience on people who say, I don't have enough experience?
I disagree with them. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a signature story. Everybody has life lessons that they have that are worth sharing. They just need to hang out with somebody. That's my process. I first, when somebody hires me to help them write their speech, I've written 5 speeches for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I wrote his TED Talk. Derek Huff, Dancing with the Stars. Hank Haney, Tiger Woods golf coach for his best 6.5 years. Donnie Marie Osmond, Paul Abdul. The list goes on and on and on. My process begins with an interview. And the interview basically asks them evocative questions about their life, just random. And then we pause and say, what life lessons did you just learn from that? For example, if your dad and mom are in the military, or one or the other or both, you have a tendency to refuse to develop long, strong, deep friendships with your teenage friends because you know you're going to move in 2 years. Because you move every 2 years, you're aloof. You never get that emotional connection. Well, what life lessons did you learn? I mean, that's a philosophical question, a psychologically based question that could milk from someone's soul, milk from someone's memories of what you learned every time you had to move every 2 years. It teaches. When someone's, you're talking to them and all of a sudden they say, I was adopted. I came to America when I was 12 from Russia, and I'm so grateful to be here. But wait, time out. Let's talk about the mindset of someone who's been adopted. Let's just learn the life lessons. What is it like to feel like someone gave you away, that you weren't enough, that there was some reason why your mom did not want you? And then we start talking about it. Oh, yeah, I want to find my birth mother. I at least want to find the circumstances. Oh, my gosh, I had a much better life because she was willing to give me to this family, and it's a whole different deal. In that mindset, I wrote one of my hit songs, used to get a lot of radio play. It's called Special Man. Lyrical hook, any male can be a father, but it takes a special man to be a dad. And there was a national association with, that kind of brought in and attracted parents and children who were in the adoption, relationship. And they used that as a theme song. I'm so sick and tired of the mainstream media and these wackos on TV slamming toxic masculinity. Well, look at the national statistics of kids who grow up in a fatherless home. They don't have a fighting chance. No. And most of the guys that are incarcerated grew up without a father in the home. Stop slamming masculinity. It's so powerful, and it's so important for us to be real men with a sensitivity and a compassion, and we put women on a pedestal, and it's so critically important. But at the same time, let's talk about the realities of what it means to step up and celebrate Dad's Day, not just Father's Day. That's one of the reasons why I just adore you, dude. You're the perfect poster child for the real man. You really are. Athletic, articulate, handsome father, man of faith, devoted family man. You check the boxes. That's so critically important. It's important.
I appreciate that.
No, it's so important.
You may be mistaken and all that. I think I have you fooled.
No,
that's my great talent.
No, that's great.
I have you fooled. Okay, so everybody, I think asking yourself, if you don't have someone, Dan Clark's not in front of you asking the evocative questions. You need to ask yourself those evocative questions and develop your your story.
And let me simplify. What you can do is invite a friend, someone you trust who will allow you, because of that trust, it'll allow you to be as vulnerable as you need to be and share stories that nobody knows. I had an NFL superstar, I won't call him by name, but he was in my basement in my family room, and I'm interviewing him. I'm helping him write his speech in his book. And I asked him a question, and he breaks down just sobbing. I felt real connected. I'm trying to pat him on the shoulder. And he shared the story of his sister getting killed in a car accident, and he had never mourned her death. He had never cried, and he's doing it in my basement. And after the fact, it was all recorded. He said that's too close to home. He's not going to put that in his speech or put that in his book, but it was therapeutic. So part of this interview process has to be with someone either who you don't have a clue that you'll never see him again, or someone who's so close that you can be vulnerable. So you could actually go to a community college. You could go to, Salt Lake Community College. You could go to any one of these smaller private universities and seek out the professor in the journalism or communication department and just say, can you give special extra credit to one of your students if they would come and interview me with the mindset that they're interviewing me to write a book or to write an article. And always get a young man and a young woman so you can get both perspectives of the questions that they create to ask you, so you can really use that. And that's only the first of 4 ways to find your own content and your own material and your own stories. The second source is called transitional experiences. And that's where you go from something to something, from elementary school to junior high, middle school, from junior high, middle school to high school to college, getting your first job, getting fired from a job, falling in love, falling out of love. You know, like we talked about the military children, you know, moving, whatever the case may be. A transition could be marriage, it could be divorce. You could just itemize transitional experiences, and everybody, if you take the time to pause and just analyze your life, just start from DNA, start when you can remember. Boom, 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 boom. The third source is my favorite source to find content and material, your own stories. Significant emotional events, SEE. Psychologists call them SEE, significant emotional events. And what that is it's an experience that you can quantify and measure how you thought, what you believed, and how you acted and behaved before it occurred, and how you now think differently and act and behave differently because it occurred. So the two operative words are before and because, before and because. So my football paralysis, battled cancer when I was 8 years old, throat cancer. The death of my dad. I'm on my way out the door of my hotel room to go speak when I get the phone call that my dad died that morning at 7 a.m. It's one of my iconic stories that I use all the time to close my speeches. What I learned from a bellman who rose to the occasion that day when I was just down. I was as low as I'd ever been, and he fired up. You know, being hospitalized with COVID, almost died. I mean, I have these significant emotional events. Everybody has those, Frank. They might not be paralyzed for 14 months like I was, but everyone has one as long as you don't compete against others and you compete only against what you're capable of. We raised our kids on several mantras, one of which was the only person you need to be better than is the person you were yesterday. Stop competing and comparing against others, because you're going to find someone more beautiful, more handsome, faster, bigger, stronger. And you're going to be better than someone, which gives you that sense of arrogance. And you don't want to have either one of those. Just fire up. Who are you? And what are you supposed to do to become the best version of yourself every day? Stop living in the past and stop hanging around with people who force you to live in the past. Call them out. You know, you keep dragging me in the past. It's like you're trying to rob my old house and I don't live there anymore. Come on, give me a freaking break and stop living in the future, because that ain't going to happen unless you take care of right now.
Yeah.
And people who can't live in the present is because their present sucks, so fix it. Stop whining. Get up and go again. Don't get me started, man. These folks just bother me.
I barely get you started. I don't have to do much to prime the pump. Like,
anyway,
you just go.
So, and then the fourth source of material is a bucket list. So if you think that you don't have as extraordinary experiences as I've had, if you don't think you have some sexy stories, you don't have to have your head cut off and speak fluent French to be inspirational. You already have enough inside of you. You've already experienced enough crazy events in your life right now that would make you so interesting to listen to for 30, 60 minutes in a keynote speech. You just have to figure out what life lessons are worth sharing that are compelling enough to someone to go, wow. And it could be as easy as teaching your kid how to walk.
Yeah.
He kept falling down. Duh.
Right.
You have to crawl before you walk. You have to drink milk before you eat meat. I mean, all these wonderful analogies that were in front of us, no matter what phase or what part of life we're in. I mean, look around. Let me give you an example. So we're in this beautiful studio, and you're in your beautiful building, and there's a thermostat that regulates all of our experiences. And I say that because if you're hot, you can't concentrate. If you're cold, you can't concentrate. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you have to go to the bathroom, you can't freaking listen. You can't love. Yeah, if you're hungry, you're like, so let's just take care of the basic needs. And the thermostat is a gadget, an object that every person on this planet has access to. So why don't you use your passion, creativity, and imagination to figure out how you could use the thermostat operating system and teach self-esteem and self-worth to the world? Oh, you could? Yeah, you can. Don't give me this. I don't have enough stories and experiences. Find them and use them. Milk them. Make them into something. Let me use the thermostat as an experience. Sorry, I have to keep fixing. I'm afraid my toupee is going to fall off, and I'm going to look like Frank.
Mine did. I took mine off. It got so annoying.
Every time Frank got a gray hair, he just plucked it out. At least I'm hanging on.
I walked into a barber shop the other day. This is a real story.
That is funny.
That's
funny. You got a deal? Like Tuesday's tacos? Come
I
on,
walked
man.
into the barber shop because it was part of another. It was like a soda shop and a barber shop, and I walked in, and the barber looked up at me, and I said, "I'm not your customer." I mean, he looked at me like, "What are you doing here?"
See, that's so funny. And in my situation, I'm losing hair right here. I'm growing into places I don't even need it.
Everywhere else.
Not a fair trade-off. My only hope is the hair in my right ear will grow long enough I can comb it up over the top of my head and fake everybody out. Anyway, so everybody has access to a thermostat. Everybody has access to a movie theater. Oh my gosh, life is a film. I'm the producer. I'm the director. I'm the writer. What can I do? Use your freaking imagination to come up with stories if you don't currently have something that, I got hit by a bus. You don't have to have one of those.
Yeah,
but if you want one, I know a lot of guys who would.
Well, this is a follow-up question I have. You said something about it. Finding your stories and molding them into stories. And does a story always have to have a message, or is a story just entertainment? For example, I told you a story as we were just messing around before we started about how I dislocated my finger and they taped it up and then I could play and the rest. Okay, is that an experience? Is there a story in there? Or is that just like, well, that's an entertaining little anecdote?
So the story was he was playing football. He's a quarterback, star quarterback. He comes under center for the snap. Center can't remember the snap count. It's on 2. He hikes it on 1, dislocates his right index throwing hand finger, and it's hanging a right. So if you can visualize.
Yeah, it was like hanging a right.
And pops it back in, tapes it, and he ends up playing for the rest of the season, and you broke Utah records with a broken finger. Okay, so that's the story. What's the life lesson? Well, I can't do this anymore. It hurts too much. I quit. How many wusses do we know in our lives that would use that as an example, as just an excuse? I can't do this anymore. Are you freaking kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
Your why was bigger than your why not. Personal pride, I get a chance of a lifetime. This is a dream come true. I've dreamed about playing college football at the highest level since I was a little kid, and now why would I want to walk off the field with a broken finger?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh, I can't let down my teammates. With all due respect, the second string quarterback in those days behind you wasn't at your same level. So you go out of the game and all of a sudden we drop by 50%. All these whys were bigger than your why not that gave you a reason. Now you start itemizing. But now you don't leave the answers on the table. You say, how did you deal with the pain? What was rehab? How did you surround yourself with remember, I went to 16 doctors, 15 told me I wouldn't get better. What if the trainer that day, who was it, Billy Bean at the time?
Billy Bean.
My hero, my guy, yeah. What if Billy Bean had said, oh, Frank, you're done for the year, man, come on, and give you no option, no choice? But instead he said, man, that's no big deal. We can just pop that sucker back in place. You're going to be good by next Saturday.
The great part about that, sir, is 2 things that came up. One is it happened. I looked at my finger, and my first thought was, I'm going to be sidelined after all of the effort and work and determination to get to this moment. I'm going to be sidelined by a guy who can't remember the snap count. Like, that's going to hold me back?
Exactly.
And that was too much to take. I couldn't do that. And then there was Coach Pete.
You got to love him, baby.
Coach Pete yelling from the background, get him back in there. Like, I didn't even have a choice. Get him back in there. So no matter what was happening, I was going back into the game. And so there was this additional motivation that was surrounding me. So,
and you can make it funny. I remember playing against the University of Oklahoma. J.C. Watts is the quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
Elvis Peacock's in the backfield, and Billy Sims is the Heisman Trophy winner. I'm a defensive end. I have triangle technique. I have to look at the tight end. I have to look at the quarterback, and I have to look at the running back triangle. Whatever the tight end does determines what I do. He blocks down, veer offense. I've got to cinch down, and I'm taking the quarterback. If he releases outside, I take him man to man in pass coverage because I'm a stand-up linebacker. I've got wheels as a defensive end. So I get down on my stance, and I'm trying to see the quarterback, and I can't even see him. The guy is this tall in his stance. He could have kick-started a 747 jet. I'm looking through his legs. I'm trying to see what's going on. They snap the ball. Next thing I remember, I'm flying through the air on my back. And what had happened was one of these converted fullbacks that's like 5'10", 640 pounds with a faux.
Yeah.
He hits me so hard, I fly through the air, I land on my back, and I hear the crowd cheer. And I'm thinking, wow, they scored a touchdown. What a drag. I waddle up to my knees to look in the end zone to see if someone had scored, and it was as if I had tunnel vision. It was as if I was looking through a telescope. And what had happened was this guy who had hit me, he hit me so hard, he knocked my helmet around my head, so I'm looking out my ear hole. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I fixed my helmet, and I started to cry. And I get up and I waddle off the field. And before I even get to the sideline, defensive linebacker coach, he points. He won't even talk to me. I just turn around. So I go back in the huddle. And after you've been crying for a while and you try to stop and you start going, fuh, fuh, fuh. I'm in the huddle. All the dudes are like, Clark, you freaking wuss. Cowboy up. Come on, man. I'm like, fuh, fuh. Next play, I get down. I tackle the quarterback. I sacked him for a loss. I have to admit, I ran into him by accident.
And nailed on for dear life.
But I still tackled the quarterback, caused a fumble. We recovered. We scored a touchdown. Think about this. We were kicking the crap out of the University of Oklahoma 7-0. It was those last 59 minutes that killed us.
That really got to you.
So that's my story, and I just made it funny.
Absolutely.
So now we take your story. It's not funny that your finger's in an S curve. But after the fact, when you learn the life lessons and itemize what you actually can teach someone about resilience, about getting up and go again, the mindset, then after the fact, you add humor. Mm-hmm. Then you add a quote to make it evocative. Then you add emotion so people remember it. And then you polish it and reduce the redundancy, edit so every word pays its own way. You practice telling it 3 times. And now it's stored in your memory library where you can pull on it and draw from that anytime in any experience. On a podcast, somebody asks you a question. Let me tell you a story. Someone, interviews you. It does not matter. When you're preparing a speech, your stories are always there. So I have so many stories. I don't know if my memory's better than anyone else's, but because I'm a storyteller, because I'm a professional speaker, I need access to an ongoing source of stories and experiences, which means I have not forgotten that I want to teach you about a thermostat, and you keep asking more questions, man. Come on, dude.
It's one of my terrible things. It's because you say something,
I know,
and then I think of something that I have to ask you about.
Okay, so let me just explain
tell us about the thermostat,
because everybody has access to this. That's the answer to your question. Look around. There's a tree. What do you see in that tree? Seeing a tree like that, I could tell you 2 stories just by being observant of things in my environment right now. I could say, a man had a dream. What a perfect way to start a speech. Mm-hmm. A man had a dream, and a genie came to him and says, you've lived a noble life. We'll grant you one wish. And the man thinks for a moment. He says, I wish that peace and love and prosperity fill the whole earth. And the genie smiles and says, that's a great wish, sir, but we don't deal in fruits here. We only deal in seeds. Oh my gosh, let me just tell you about this finger, this story. And do we, in our lives, do we scratch where it itches? Do we go where the source of pain is, or do we only deal with the symptoms? So fixing the finger really is just the superficial first beginning because it's the physical side. But what about the mental side? What about the emotional side? What about the connection of the head and the heart? Let me tell you what I was thinking. I cannot believe I put in all of these hundreds of hours to have it taken away just from a broken finger because some, couldn't remember the snap count. And we could make it funny. Mm-hmm. I looked at my finger and I thought, well, I have to think of something funny to say. But
that looks like Dan Clark's finger.
Yeah, exactly. Or I'm sure glad it wasn't my bird finger because, man, I mean, because that's going to be really hard.
Coach asked me which way to the locker room. I just held up my finger and pointed to it.
Exactly. What happened? Coach, you won't believe what happened to me. And the coaches can't hear what you're saying. They're like, are you freaking kidding? He's so rude. He's so disrespectful. Come on, Dolce will never play again for me, ever again. You know? I mean, you could make it funny. You could say, I mean, I just saw a side-by-side photograph of Prince William, and they showed him going like this to the crowd. He was going like this. That was the frontal picture. And then the side picture, it looked like he was flipping the bird. And it said it's the same photograph. It's the mainstream media just, curbing our opinion of what's real.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the thermostat, if you think about it, it's connected to the heating and air conditioning systems in our buildings and our homes. And we're in charge of setting that set point, the desired temperature. So we set that room temperature for 73 degrees. The second the room gets hotter, the thermostat kicks that air conditioning system into high gear, and the outside temperature, the thermostat pulls and drags and pushes the outside temperature until it's in perfect alignment with that set point, and the room's again at 73 degrees, and then the air conditioner kicks off. If the room gets colder, the thermostat's connected to the furnace, it kicks on and brings the outside temperature up to the equilibrium set point that's on the thermostat. In self-esteem and in self-worth, our thermostat is our self-worth, our self-esteem, and self-development. So we all know someone who's won $100 million playing the lottery and is bankrupt and divorced and suicidal. Those are the statistics within 3 years. We all know someone who's lost 60 pounds and they've gained 80 pounds back, celebrating the 60 pounds that they lost. We all know someone, all due respect, a wonderful woman who's done everything she knows how to do to get out of a physically and emotionally abusive relationship, only to jump back into a more dysfunctional relationship with a bigger loser than the bum she just kicked out. Why does that happen? Because unless his self-esteem and self-worth is high enough, the outside temperature, the set point thermostat, the self-worth and self-esteem will work overtime to bring that outside temperature, that outside condition, that outside environment and situation in perfect cahoots with your self-worth and self-esteem. I don't deserve $100 million. I don't deserve a better relationship. I don't deserve to take better care of my body. And we just do everything we know how to do to bring our outside environment and our outside relationships back into cahoots with our self-worth. So using the thermostat as an analogy, what we have to do is say, what am I worth? Law of attraction, we don't attract who we want, we attract who we are. We attract what we believe we deserve in relationships, in income, in cars, in toys, in work environment, in coworkers. And we go after what we believe we deserve. And it's all based on the access that every person on this, in the listening, viewing audience has a light switch. What in the world is that? Darkness cannot take away darkness, only light. You could use all the analogies in the world. Have you ever gone into a dark room and there's no electricity and you light one candle? And then what happens if you light someone else's candle and that person lights someone else's candle? Pretty soon the room is illuminated as bright as noonday, and you realize that you lighting someone else's candle did not diminish or weaken your personal light. There's so many philosophical lessons we can learn from simple things. What if your charger goes down? What do you do? I mean, we got an air purifier. We got 3 cameras going.
Yeah, we probably just yell at Jared if that happens.
See, I'm saying.
Yeah, Jared, what'd you do?
I'm just saying,
you know what I mean?
That would be the challenge. And I've conducted seminars all the time. Just look around the room and look at, talk about the table. We always talk about 4 legs. That's not a 4-legged table. What's the equilibrium? What's the sound? You could come up with a story and a life lesson about everything. Your cool socks that cost more than mine.
Mm-hmm. You're not even wearing socks.
I know.
That's the other thing you just mentioned. See, this is what you do. You say something, and then I think, well, we should blame Jared. But everything's going right. And we never said, Jared, amazing job. Amazing job, Jared, for making all of this work. So,
but if something goes wrong.
That's exactly right.
I knew you were going to say that.
But
We have to make a conscious effort to always compliment people.
it's you're saying if you light someone else's candle, like that's the thing, handing that off. And Jared looked like he was a little down in the dumps today. I thought, Jared, you did a fantastic job sitting. No, he's always happy.
Isn't that crazy that most of the time we don't go out of our way to compliment someone. We always wait until something's broken. I mean, but that's the reality of human nature. Most people don't take a marriage class. They don't read a book on relationships until their marriage starts to go south.
Falter and then...
Yeah. Why not figure out a way to fix it before it's broken? You know, it's better to build it's better to build a fence at the edge of the cliff than it is to park an ambulance at its base. I love quotes.
Yeah, you have a lot of them. Okay, now we were talking
Again,
about...
my toupee is slipping, I'm sorry.
Again, we were talking about your, like individual experience and building stories on your own life experience and how that can be meaningful to share with other people. And I love what you said about Bezos and Branson going into space and not sharing that. Like, we have an obligation to share that experience with others. Okay. Can you also lean on, like, could I say, I know a guy, Dan Clark, and I want to tell you his story. In my storytelling, can I lean on someone else's experience to tell the story, to give the message, to relay the message?
Well, how many times do we, I got back from South Africa and I went out of my way. I went on a safari. I spoke there for 3 days at a huge corporation, largest in South Africa, called Discovery. It's an insurance company. But I made sure I went out to the island to see where Nelson Mandela was incarcerated and studied up on his life, incarcerated for 27 years. And you tie that into the story of the rugby team winning the world, the world championship back in 1997 when he was the first year as president and blah, blah, blah. So I haven't had that experience, but it's so worth sharing. It's so inspirational, and you conclude with the poem Invictus, which he, had in his cell there in Robben Island. And yeah, I love that. You can share stories about others. I mean, I love to tell the story about Kirk Gibson coming out of the dugout and hitting that game winner in the ninth inning as a pinch hitter, in the World Series. The Giants never recovered. I mean, there's so many great stories. Think about your quarterback. I've used this story so many times, bro, about a couple of years ago, I think it was 2022, time's going by so fast, that all 4 NFL divisional playoff games ended in the last play of the game. That's never happened in the history of the NFL. Every one of those 4 division games they ended in the last play of the game. And Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs, playing against Josh Allen, our good University of Wyoming boy, Buffalo Bills. And in the last 2, so anybody has access to this information. I just took the time to dig it up and consolidate it so I could share the story in a quick amount of time.
Yeah.
In the last 2 minutes of that game, collectively, both teams scored 25 points in the last 2 minutes of the game. With 13 seconds left on the game, Josh Allen throws the go-ahead touchdown for the Bills. Now, what do you think? We've played football for so many years. You got 13 seconds. Every single teammate's going, are you freaking kidding me? Every fan is like, you got to be kidding me. Maybe even most of the coaches are throwing down the clipboard, taking off their headsets, going, oh my gosh, dream down the tube. Just pissed in the wind. And what happens? Andy Reid and his offensive coordinator and Patrick Mahomes get together, and Patrick Mahomes goes out on the field, and I talked to him. And he gets in the huddle. He goes, we got 13 seconds to go 75 yards. We can do it. And what does he do? He calls a play. Tyree catches it, calls a second play, gets them down into the third. He goes from the 25-yard line down to the 40-yard line. So what is that? He goes...
Opposite field, 25 to his own 40?
Yeah, so he goes 40 yards, what is that, 25, 35, 45, 35.
Yeah.
In 2 plays. And with 3 seconds left on the clock, his kicker, Butker, comes out.
Yeah.
And he has already missed the previous kick. And he kicks the game-tying field goal that puts it into overtime. And because of the NFL rules, Patrick Mahomes gets the ball first, and he drives down for that game-winning field goal, and they win. 13 seconds, and they become champions and go on to win the Super Bowl. So who's going to say quit? You never say never. I mean, that's a story that I can't tell about me, but I can tell that about Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and their partnership, their belief in each other, their belief in their tools, their belief in their teammates.
Yeah.
You know, it's the old, you're behind by 21 points at halftime and there's no 21-point plays. You got to just do it one play at a time. Sure. You know that. You're the expert. See, if I coach you as a speaker, you have so many stories just from your athletic career, so many stories from your business career, so many stories from your commentating career. All you got to do is take the time to just share the story, random. I don't know what the life lesson is. Let me just tell you something happened. I remember this game and blah, blah, blah. And this guy I was working with, the chemistry was horrible, and he kept interrupting me, and he had bad facts. And I'm like, are you freaking serious? This guy's a complete moron, blah, blah, blah. And then after the fact, you go, but I learned this. I learned this. I learned this. I learned this.
Yeah. Well, now you have me all excited about that. After the podcast, we're going to go have to spend some time somewhere because now I want to write down all of these things. I keep thinking of these things now. You have
That's good.
You have the juices flowing. Okay. I want to talk about your book. That's the main reason why we came here today. But I have one more question about storytelling.
Okay.
What is your very favorite story to tell?
It's probably a story that I wrote when I was 13. It's my most iconic story. It was made into a film at Paramount Studios starring Jack Lemmon. It's called Puppies for Sale. A store owner was tacking a nail in a sign above his store door which read Puppies for Sale. Signs like that have a way of attracting small children, and sure enough, a little boy appears at the store owner's side. He says, "How much are you going to sell the puppies for?" The store owner assured the little boy that they were very, very good dogs, and he didn't expect to let any of them go for anything less than $35 to $50. To that, the little boy reaches in his pocket. He pulls out some change. He counts it for a minute. He looks up at the store owner and he says, "Well, sir, I have $2.37. Can I look at the little puppies?" The store owner smiles. He says, "Sure, son," and he whistles. Out of the kennel comes Lady, the mama dog, running down the aisle of the store, followed by 5 little teeny balls of fur, one puppy lagging considerably behind the others. Immediately, the little boy singles out the lagging, limping puppy. He says, "What's wrong with that little dog?" The store owner says, "Oh, we took that dog to the veterinarian. The doctor examined it, discovered it didn't have a hip socket. It would always limp. It would always be slow." To that, the little guy gets excited. He says, "That's the little puppy I want to buy." The store owner says, "Nah, you don't want to buy that little dog. If you really want him, I'll just give him to you." Now the little guy gets ticked off. He gets right in the face of the store owner. He points his finger. And he says, "I don't want you to just give him to me. That little puppy right there is worth every bit as much as all the other little dogs, and I'll pay full price. In fact, I'll give you $2.37 now and 50 cents a month until I have him paid for." Store owner says, "Nah, you don't want to buy that little dog. He's never going to be able to run and jump and play with you like the other little puppies." In response, the little boy reaches down. He pulls up his pant leg to reveal a badly twisted left leg supported by a big steel brace, a big steel splint going down both sides of his leg. The little physically challenged kid looks up at the store owner and he says, "Well, sir, I don't really run so well myself, and the little puppy will need someone who understands." It's a good story.
It's a great story. You came up with that when you were 13?
Nah. I'll tell you the other story I wrote that my teacher, I mean, what a great life lesson. I had a teacher in 7th grade who saw in me something I didn't see in myself. Isn't that coaching? Isn't that parenting? Isn't that employing 101? And she encouraged me to write a story and participate in a speech essay competition. I was like, no, that's not me. I was always the kid who could make people laugh, but I could never stand up in front of anybody to tell a story or give a speech. She encouraged me. I said, okay. So I wrote that story, won the speech essay competition.
Sure.
Ended up putting it on a family holiday greeting card. And then I published it in my very first book back in 1982, Getting High, How to Really Do It. And then it became the most iconic story in the first volume of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I helped sell the millions of copies. But the other story I wrote in that same weekend when I was 13 was a story about my dad. And it's another iconic story called The Circus, another very, very important chicken soup for the soul story. So when I was 12 years old, a lot of people ask me where I come up with my stories. A lot of people ask me where I come up with my messages. Well, obviously, I wrote Puppies for Sale. I wrote Broken Doll that I shared earlier. But this is a 100% true story about my dad. You just have to be observant, and you have to figure out what life lessons have I learned. And obviously, I didn't remember the story. I had no reason to share the story when I was 12, but now that I'm 13, 12 to 13, I'm like, okay, I can do this. There's a reason. You have to have a reason.
Sure.
A reason to milk from yourself life lessons and stories. Otherwise, I just had that experience. I don't need to share it with anybody. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. Well, yeah, if you're doing what I do for a living, everything matters. Figure it out. So I'm 12 years old. I'm standing in line with my dad to purchase tickets to go to the circus. And finally, there's only one family between myself and my father and the ticket counter. One family, 8 children, probably all under the age of 12. And one could sense that they didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have any exotic designer clothes. There weren't any animals anywhere, but the clothes were very, very clean. And you could tell there was a lot of pride in the family. One could sense that they'd never been to the circus before. They were talking about the elephants and the clowns and the acrobats, all the things they were going to see that night. A lot of pride in the family. The children weren't running all around out of control. There's nothing I can do. No, the children looked like the modern-day Von Trapp family singers. They were standing 2 by 2 in line, holding hands. Father and the mother were standing at the head of the pack, proud as could be. Mother had her husband's hand. She's looking up at him like, gosh, you are my knight in shining armor. He's looking back at her like, you got that right. Dad steps up to the ticket counter and he asks the ticket lady for the price of the tickets. The ticket lady quotes the price of the tickets. Suddenly the wife's hand lets go of her husband's hand, and her countenance changes. The man's lip starts to quiver. Again, he leans forward and again asks for the purchase price of the tickets. The ticket lady quotes the price. Turns out the man doesn't have enough money. How is he supposed to turn and tell 8 little kidlets that he couldn't afford to take them to the circus? Seeing what was going on, my father reached in his pocket. He pulled out a $20 bill, dropped it on the cement. We were not wealthy in any sense of the word, and think about how much money that was back in those days. My dad went out of his way to keep this father's pride intact in front of his family, and he stooped down, picked up the $20 bill, tapped this man on the shoulder. He said, "Excuse me, sir, this fell out of your pocket." The man knew what was going on. He squeezed tightly onto my dad's hand, squeezed tightly onto that $20 bill, and with a tear coming down the side of his cheek, he looks my dad square in the eyes, and he says, "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. This means the world to me and my family." My dad and I, we went back and got into the car. We didn't go to the circus that night. We eventually went to the circus, but we didn't do without. But what's the message? I have a very wealthy uncle who would have accomplished the exact same goal. Hey, what's the matter? You can't afford to go to the circus? Hey, let me sign the check. Hey, stop the bus. Let's take the whole flipping community on me. That's not service. That's selfishness. That's what about me? And my dad was exactly the opposite. It's amazing how much we can accomplish in life if we do what we need to do and then give the glory to who deserves the glory. I love telling that story. But now there's another story. So my dad, he battles cancer for 6.5 years. He was diagnosed to live 6 months. He's one of 25 experimental patients going back to the Mayo Clinic. 24 out of the 25. The other 24 passed away at 6 months. My dad kept battling. Talk about, tenacity. He because of the success he had with somatostatin, which was the drug they were using for his carcinoid cancer. The FDA approved that for cancer treatment for carcinoid cancer after my dad's passing. He was so successful. So that was a reason why my dad kept fighting and kept living. And so when my dad passed away, the tradition back in the day was our local newspaper would always publish an obituary. There was an obituary section in every newspaper. I don't know if they still have that tradition today, but they would publish a picture of the deceased and then this small eulogy or tribute that the family would write that would say, this is when his funeral is, this is the life he lived, so proud of his good name. And so I was out of town in Seattle, Washington when my dad died, another one of my iconic stories. So I spoke on Friday, spent the night, spoke on Saturday, and then I hustled home. So we're at my mom's home on Sunday. My dad had planned his funeral a few times because he had so many years to think about it. This is who I want to speak. My dad, funny. This is who I don't want to come to my funeral. I think everybody should write that out. And we're discussing the funeral, the memorial service, the celebration of life. And my siblings are there, my mom, and her phone rings, landline, no cell phones in those days. And we're reading between the lines. And what happened was this lady says, "Is this Mrs. Clark?" And my mom said, "Yes." "Who's this?" She says, "Is your husband S. Wayne Clark?" And my mom said, "Yes, but who is this?" She said, "A few years ago, I was a young mother." She said, "My husband left me high and dry with babies and bills. I had no money for diapers, no money for formula. We were starving. Our cupboards were completely barren. And I prayed to know what to do, and I felt inspired to go to the local grocery store and that some miracle would happen. I had no idea what to expect, but I just believed that a miracle would happen. And I was there, and I just put some diapers, a little bit of formula, just a couple of little things in the grocery cart. And I stepped up and got in line to go to the cashier with no money. And she said, when I stepped up to pay, the cashier said, the man who was in front of you paid for your groceries and left $100 for you to fill up your shopping cart. And she said, I rushed out of the store to thank him, and he'd already gone. He'd disappeared. And when your husband died and I saw his picture in the obituary, I remembered it was him. And I thought I would call you and just tell you what a great man he is and how he saved my life that day. And I share that because that's the addition to the story. So many of us have had experiences in our lives. And if we just stay in tune with the life lessons we learned, it's amazing how sometimes another experience comes into our experience that is an add-on, that's a caveat, that's a sequel that basically says, wait a minute, there's more to this life lesson than you can imagine. I mean, for example, when I tested positive for COVID on December 17th in 2020 or 2019, whatever it was, 2019. And I'm staying in a different wing in our house, and my daughter is in town from California, and she's a choreographer, dancer for Dua Lipa, just got off a world tour. She's right now on tour with another huge name artist, working with the biggest production company, $1 billion company in the world. She's big time. Meghan Trainor, Sierra, Russell Wilson's wife. Danced on the Grammys, Dance Academy Awards. She's big time. I'm so proud of her. And she's in town for the holidays. She and my wife are staying in a different part of the house. My wife has a prompting that something's drastically wrong with me. At 11:30 at night, she comes into the room where I am, and I can't breathe. I have no energy to even text her. So she and my daughter put me in the car, and they rushed me to IMC on 5300 South. On the way, it's about a 20-minute drive from my home. On the way, they pull over twice to let me throw up on the side of the highway. COVID protocol, they pull up, they have to let me off in the parking lot and watch me walk across the curb and walk across the parking lot to check myself in to the emergency room. And my oxygen level was 81. It's like Keystone Cops are scrambling, trying to get me some oxygen, trying to get me a room. I mean, it was brutal. I was so sick and I couldn't breathe. Think about, we've had our wind knocked out of us. That's what it was so scary for me. I don't even remember being afraid my whole life. I fought some of the biggest guys as a Golden Glove boxer. I was truly afraid walking into that hospital by myself.
Yeah.
And my wife and daughter said they sat in the car and sobbed for 15 minutes wondering whether or not they would ever see me alive again. And I know why my wife stopped crying, because she remembered I had millions of dollars of life insurance. And I can see her crying in my funeral saying, I'd give $10,000 of it just to have him back. So I can tell a story, add on some humor, and then bring up the real story. So I'm there for 7.5 days, and the whole staff comes in. There's several doctors and nurses, and it's as if they don't think I'm there, and I can hear every word. They're going to put me into ICU and intubate me. I'm 30 minutes away from intubation. And I knew that was a death sentence, so I checked myself out of the hospital. I was so freaking mad. But I only share that because I was so sick, so I'm oxygen up to bed. And all of a sudden, Christmas morning, I'm by myself. The guy in the room next to me has already died. Eerie, dimly lit room. I'm in my room, and my phone lights up. And it's my daughter, Alexandria, dancer choreographer from California. She's in town. She says, Daddy, look out your window. We found out where your room is. And the blinds have been shut the whole time. So I take off my oxygen and I waddle over to the cold window seal in my, my cute little teeny hospital gown that I put on backwards on purpose just to piss
Why
off
not?
the nurses. So I waddle over to the window seal. I open up the blinds, and I'm on the 6th floor on the corner room. And I look down in the parking lot, and there is my wife and my daughter with 2 signs, and they've choreographed this whole dance. Merry Christmas, Dad. We love you. Keep fighting. And I share that with the background that my daughter's a world-class choreographer, because regardless of how many stages she has graced in her amazing career, that was by far the best dance and the most important dance she's ever danced. Because when I climbed back in bed and the doctors came in and nurses and they were ticked off, my vital signs went sky high because of that experience. So talk about mind over matter. Talk about physical resilience when you're sick, your emotional state, your mindset. It really does make a difference.
Well, we just finished, my daughter and I just finished riding the Lodija bike race. We each rode a couple stages in that race. And it's really interesting that you bring that up, because everybody has
So that starts
these,
in Logan and goes up to Jackson Hole over Hoback Junction. And
Yes.
stuff. See, I just want them to know how cool that is.
all the
Good
stuff.
for
It's
you.
an amazing ride, and it's amazing scenery.
My buddy started
and-
that and then built it.
Oh, it's Sunrise Cyclery in Logan. It's a great spot.
Yeah, but my buddy was hired by them to produce it.
to
just
put it
really
on.
put it on. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Well, it's an event.
Yeah,
It's
it
an
is.
unbelievable event. And they do such a fantastic job. Well, everybody has these smartwatches these days, and we were, a bunch of people on our team were wearing these watches, and one of the features on the watch is your body battery. Okay? And so it tells you like where you are in terms of 0 to 100% on your body battery. Now, if you ride that race, you look at your watch and your body battery's down to 5% or whatever it is. Well, we kept saying, my body battery, I'm only at 5%, but I got through the race because of everybody around me, because I was taking someone else's extra body battery. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's your story, is that your body battery was 0. And here comes your wife and your daughter, and you stole that body battery. It's the same story of lighting someone else's candle and all of those analogies that I really appreciate. And I love that story. I think that's one story of yours, and I think I've heard all of your stories. I think that's one story of yours that I've never heard, and it's such a great story.
You can tell I haven't really told it. That's why I got emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to.
Yeah.
And the art and science of storytelling is to make sure you're present in the moment and bring to life the emotion that you felt when you experienced it. So my sales pitch, my serve pitch to any athlete and any extraordinary celebrity like you, or somebody who is given an opportunity to take the stage, I call it the privilege of the platform. And what I always remind them is that people expect us to share our story at the same level of excellence that created it. So if you're a superstar athlete and you come off the field and you're a bumbling idiot, you got to fix that. There's a disconnect. You have a chance to be a role model and a hero to somebody instead of going, yeah, if you stand up and say, yeah, this is what happened, and that's not slamming anything, that's not sexist, that's not racist, that's reality. Let's just frickin' become educated, articulate, passionate, creative, eloquent communicators. We owe it to ourselves.
Yeah.
We owe it to ourselves to be able to communicate with anyone at that deepest heart-to-heart level. Authenticity. I mean, it's that's critically important. It's just the goal.
Well, the ability to it's really difficult to connect, and we're all about connection, like about the body battery, about stealing from others' body battery and sharing that with other people. And if you can't communicate, how do you connect? It's very difficult to connect.
So true. But let me just compliment you. We've known each other for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And we always said, yeah, let's go out to lunch. Let's do this. I see you at galas. You bid big bucks to support amazing causes and in auctions. I honor you for that. And then all of a sudden we finally pull it off where I come into your office and come into your studio and see all the gang. And you right out of the chute start flattering me with how much you know about me. That's the secret to connection, bro. Because I know a lot about you. I remember I came in, I'm ripping out
you had all the stuff.
I knew where you went to high school. I knew the records you set at the U and your amazing career. And I've listened to you every single week on the radio because of you, not because of the topic. And that's the lesson learned here. If we really want to connect, do our due diligence. Know who you're talking with. Know something about them so you can connect at that intimate level. And that changes the conversation. And you can do that, turn it into a game before a job interview. Find out who's going to interview you and find out about them. Mm-hmm. Go in and ask them questions. I understand, your dog's a dachshund. And I've always dreamed about, having a wiener dog. I was going to name him Limo. But right now I have a bulldog, and I named him Hummer. And I have a little white Maltese, and she was so expensive. I named her Portia. Now I got these three dogs in my garage. And he's like, really? You how did you know I had a wiener dog? Like, I don't know. I just, I mean, there's ways to connect before we connect. That's the kicker.
Yeah.
So that's what you're teaching the world. You're so interested about people. And when people know you're interested in them, man, they just will open up and connect at that deepest level. You're so good at it. I don't know anyone's better than
No,
you.
that's
No, you say, I want to talk
nice.
to you about your book, and then you know all the chapters, and my laws, and I want to talk to you about this. And I'm like, how in the world do you know all this stuff about me? I'm like,
because it's so interesting.
I know, but
because
you're
it's so
such a good
fascinating.
human being to find that interesting. Most people just want to find out about themselves. Most people only want to talk about themselves.
Yeah, well, that's
I'm
the
so
problem
tired
with
of you
today.
talking about me. Now, why don't you talk about me?
That's the problem with today is everyone's about it's me.
Yeah, it's like, if you're ever having a bad day and you don't like yourself, just go to New York Times Square and you'll always find a guy with purple hair naked running through the streets, and suddenly you're like, my life doesn't suck as bad as I thought it did.
It's pretty good. Life's pretty good.
Thank you for listening to the Know Your Shit podcast presented by eHub. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.